have two slightly disconnected messages I want to squeeze in today. One is what I've been thinking about. It was triggered by something I learned from one of my students, actually, because I was catching up with some of the things that she'd started writing. And I thought I should share this reflection. And the reflection is as follows. It's from a student of knowledge's perspective. And I find it really interesting, and it sort of reflected my own experience, although a long, long time ago. So this person, in her 20s, somehow finds her way, having done a degree and everything, finds her way in full-time Islamic education, right? So she's doing the Alimiya program or an Islamic studies degree, or however you want to describe it. One of the programs that basically, generally people like myself and other Imams and ulama have done at some point, and it ranges from somewhere between 6 and 8-9 years, depending on the institution and the curriculum and so on. So she finds herself in this, right? And up until that point, relatively practicing family, you kind of got into the habit of certain aspects of it, certain habits of religiosity, certain habits of deendari, right? So some, regular salah, some regular recitation of the Quran, some regular adhkar, some religious discussion at home in the family, and so on. Comes in, starts studying, and obviously the traditional Islamic curriculum always begins with the Arabic language, even if you're an Arab, right? You study Arabic language, you study it classically, you study Arabic grammar, you study rhetoric or balagha and so on. So starts studying some fiqh and all of the Islamic ulum, and absolutely falls in love with it. But what I've now heard from many people, and my own practice reflects that, is that for a while, everything that they have known, everything that had been known up until that point about religion and religiosity, everything that they'd been practicing, those simple deeds, those simple actions, those daily actions. And I'm not talking about the fard stuff, I'm talking about the mustahab stuff, right? Fard, inshallah, everybody should do. We can't assume people don't do their fard. When you get into the buzz of seeking knowledge, it all seems insignificant. It's all very small, and you find you get so into the books that you find less and less time to do that, right? You're so busy reading books about Quran that you have less time for tilawah, right? You're studying so many. You're reading so many hadiths about good deeds and good a'mal that you have no time to do the a'mal, right? And so on and so forth. So the intellectual aspect, the intellectual development in the Islamic sciences kind of starts to reduce the amount of amal, the amount of spiritual activity, the amount of worshipful activity, right? And the reason why I thought I would talk about this today is because on a couple of occasions, more than a couple of occasions, I've talked about how for the student of knowledge, the greatest act of worship is seeking knowledge. Reading that book is the greatest act of worship. But what should never be misunderstood in that statement is that it shouldn't replace the other acts of worship. It should simply be prioritized should it clash with the other acts of worship. So if a person can manage tahajjud without compromising, without falling behind in their studies, their Islamic studies, right, then tahajjud is well and good. But if tahajjud impacts upon their studies, then the studies has to take priority. That's basically what the message is about. That's what that principle is, that seeking knowledge is the most important ibadah for the student of knowledge. But the flip side of this is what I'm discussing here, that seeking knowledge itself, when we take our religiosity to be a purely intellectual endeavor. Our connection with Islam is purely an intellectual endeavor. An endeavor that is about reading books, or even for people like myself, is just about teaching, or it's about going to classes, right? Then the risk factor, right, is that the ibadah diminishes, right? And we have to find a balance. Or sometimes the people don't benefit from the fact that learning the Arabic language means that your dhikr is now much more powerful. Learning the Arabic language means that tilawah is much more meaningful. So it's kind of unfortunate that now that we've developed the ability to really benefit from our tilawah of the Quran, right, suddenly, we don't have time for it. Okay? Now, the point, not everybody here is a student of knowledge studying Arabic, etc., etc. That's really not the point. That's just to tell you the story. The point is that these little actions that we sometimes used to look back on and think of them as insignificant, right? Or, oh wow, I'm studying this and I'm studying that, I'm studying fiqh, I'm studying hadith, I'm studying tafsir, and there's no time for all of these things. This is the core of our spirituality. When people talk about connection, etc., etc., and feeling spiritually connected and so on and so forth, that's where it comes from. Of course, how well you do it, how concentrated you are, and whether learn some of the meanings, etc., plays a big part. But this is the core of spirituality. Your 5 times salah, right? As far as your daily fard ibadah goes, your 5 times salah is the absolute, it's the largest part of the root of your tree of spirituality, right? Your nawafil are some of your other branches, but things like tilawah of the Quran is a nafl ibadah. Things like dhikr, some of the adhkar that we do after salah, before we go to sleep, right? They are nawafil, right? They are nawafil. They're mustahab acts. Yet they are spiritually so powerful that they make the fard easier to do, right? Because they nourish us spiritually. Sometimes they are mustahab, but they're necessary for you and me. Take reciting Ayatul Kursi before you go to sleep and after every single salah, right? Yes, it's mustahab to do it, but it's like you don't need to install a burglar alarm in your house. You don't need to install. It's not necessary. No law tells you that you have to install CCTV in your house. No law tells you that you have to have locks on your front door. Is there a law that you have to have locks on your front door? Right? But we all do it because we consider it to be necessary, even though there is no law that tells us it is obligatory. Why? Because it's for our safety. Because it's for our protection. So some a'mal are like that. When you recite Ikhlas, Falaq, Nas, that it gives you protection. When you recite La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, the Prophet ﷺ said that a person who does this 100 times or 10 times in various narrations remains in Allah's protection all day, right? So the protections are needed. So these a'mal, therefore, sometimes we can go into for selfish need, for my own protection, from shaitan, from jinn, from waswasa, etc., etc. But then they spiritually nourish us and make our fard easier to do. Makes it easier to get up for Fajr. That tilawah of the Quran, whether you understand it or not, right? And we do talk a lot about the necessity of understanding it. But let's say you don't understand it. It still nourishes the soul, right? These are pure ritual acts of ibadah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly rewards, right? He talks about people who the Quran is recited upon, their iman increases. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. Right? Just the mere act of the Quran being recited to them, it increases them in iman. It is mustahab to go to an Islamic gathering, a weekly halaqah. It's only mustahab, it's not fard to do it. But the spiritual boost you get from that, the spiritual connection you get from that, the spiritual boost that you get from the brotherhood and the sisterhood, right, means that yesterday you didn't get up for Fajr, but tomorrow you're getting up for Fajr. Right? Yesterday you didn't come to the masjid to perform salah, but today you did. Right? Disconnect yourself from those gatherings for a month and suddenly struggling to get up for Fajr at home. because we take nourishment from these mustahab acts. So and then they kind of become the fuel, the main fuel that propels us towards Jannah. The fard is the minimum that we must do, but these are the things that make our fard consistent. So this is the thing to, inshallah, always remember about little daily deeds. You know, our nawafil, right? You know, just 2 more extra rakats on top of our fard, right? The sunnahs. A little bit of tilawah of the Quran, a little bit of reading of the translation of the Quran every day. You know, having some sort of a routine of morning and evening adhkar. Pick up any dhikr book and they'll give you a list of du'as to recite in the morning and evening. These things are powerful, but we can sometimes get tricked into thinking, oh, what's the big deal? They're only mustahab, but they're powerful. In 1 or 2 minutes, there's a lot going on politically in the world. Right? A lot going on. We've got this, you know, we had this big turmoil in Pakistan and things like that happen. Some situations are deeply impact us. They deeply impact us in such a way that they affect the communities that we live in. Right? We're some 6,000 miles away, but, you know, we're from there. Right? So what happens to a leader in a country that we're from, right, impacts us deeply. Could there be any Islamic guidance about how we conduct ourselves? Surely there must be, right? There has to be. The most important thing is that our political loyalties are supposed to be loyalties to policy, loyalties to somebody's plans for a country, right? You know, they are not supposed to be blood loyalties for which we are willing to fall out with brothers in Islam. Our nationalistic loyalties are not above our Islamic loyalty, our loyalty to our deen, and therefore our loyalty to our Muslim brother. We cannot do political khilaf. This is all I have to say. Whenever these things happen, we cannot do political khilaf. We cannot do political ikhtilaf in a way that damages Islamic brotherhood. Right? And too many times that's what we see. Especially when it comes to the politics of the third world. I was talking about this after Fajr with brothers for too long. But the politics of I read a paper on this once, and the politics of the third world lacks something called a loyal opposition. Right? An opposition that stops short of causing damage to each other and to the country. Right? Because that one simple ingredient is missing. Right? You'll see that when there is political opposition in the first world country, there is less chaos and damage compared to when it is done in the third world country. That's a separate issue. That's a point of political science. But from a religious point of view, brothers and sisters, we need to stop short of falling out with one another. We need to stop short of offending one another here. Whatever our feelings are about what happens over there, whatever we think of the corruption or the corrupt, right, the oppressed and the oppressor, whatever we think of them, right, you're my brother, you're my sister, we're on a different side of the divide. I can't fathom how you can follow the person that you follow. You can't fathom how I follow the person that I follow. We have to find a way to sit on those sides without it damaging brotherhood and sisterhood from an Islamic perspective, without it damaging our communities. We have to find a way. And that's just food for thought, something to think about. After all, Islamic brotherhood is the most important thing. Right? إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Believers are brothers, believers are sisters. فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. When there are divides, we're supposed to find a way to reconcile. Right? And if reconciliation isn't possible, then we have to find a way to disagree without damaging our deen. Unity is deen, brothers and sisters. Having good relationships with our fellow Muslims is deen. It's deen as much as salah is deen. Right? And going against it is kabira, is a major sin as much as not praying salah is a major sin. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us all united and keep the attacks of the shaitan, from whichever quarters they come, away from us inshallah ta'ala, so that our unity stays intact. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.